This is my buddy Mike Bub. He's a 5-time IBMA Bass Player of the Year, and we've come to pay our respects to the great John Hartford.
Yeah, I never met anybody as passionate about anything as John Hartford, like, about music, river lore, history, all those kind of things. He just was a fascinating character and a fountain of knowledge of all these things. And late in his life, he was working on this book on Ed Haley, who was really one of the great early fiddle tune collectors, writers, and fiddle players. And he actually had his fiddle in pieces on his shelf in his library. It was interesting to see, that even late in his life, he was still trying to find out the beginnings of all of this stuff. Yeah, John used to host these amazing jam sessions at his house around Christmas time every year. And they kind of ended not long after I moved to town, but they were legendary. All the great Opry stars and, of course, fiddle players probably came out of the woodwork to come to these things. And from what I've heard about them, they were, kind of all-night affairs and just would go on for a couple days. He would have like a 3 or 4 day Pickin party at Christmas time. Later on, when we used to have my friend Larry Perkins had a little tiny house here in Madison that he'd rented from Earl Scruggs, and wasn't far from Earl's house. And so he would invite all those guys over for these jam sessions. We'd have Grandpa Jones or Brother Oswald, Earl Scruggs, Bobby or Sonny Osborne would be there, Benny Martin, all those guys. And then a whole other generation would be hanging out in the room together with them and playing music and getting to know them and be able to hang out with them, which was a wonderful and fun opportunity. And then slowly but surely it all kind of went away as they all passed on. But those experiences were so great. And of course, John would always be at all of them, and he loved to jam. His whole life was music, 100% music. Seemed like that's all he really cared about, especially in those later years. And he would record every jam session they ever went to. He'd pull out a little tape recorder, he had a little bag with a little tape recorder. He'd set it up, and there's probably hours and hours and hours of tapes of him jamming, which is kind of a neat thing. And they're all in his archive down there at MTSU. I guess they're slowly going through and having to catalog all that stuff. When he couldn't hold the banjo or the fiddle with his hands physically anymore, then we just brought the music to him, and he would host these jams, or his wife would host these jams at his house. And a lot of times it was, I remember the last time I was over there was a little jam we had with most of the guys in the Tennessee Mafia Jug Band. Would be Mike and Lester Armistead and Leroy Troy and Dan Kelly on fiddle, and then other assorted bluegrassers like Dell and Ronnie and Rob McCurry, and just a whole bunch of us would go over there, and they'd kind of prop him up in a big chase lounge out there, and he'd just bark orders at everybody, and he'd say, "Lester, sing," or "do this tune or that tune," whatever he wanted, he got what he wanted. And that one particular night, that's the only time I'd ever met Eddie Pennington, who's like one of the great Travis style players from Western Kentucky. And I just remember when they took John in the house, and we kind of hung around a little bit, and then as everybody's kind of walking towards the driveway to their cars, he said, "Hey, let's do one more for John right here." And we were right outside his bedroom window, and he just started playing Gentle on My Mind on the guitar, and we kind of did a little instrumental version of it there. It was really neat, poignant, and but he took a lot of visitors during that time, and when his health was kind of declining. And I remember being over there one day with my buddy Ferg, and they had him on the side porch of his house where he could see the river, and there's a navigational point there. Actually, it's on the river maps I think it's called Hartford Point. I'm not sure. I never fully researched that, but I think there's a beacon there, like a flashing light beacon, where there's a turn in the river. I think it's Pennington Bend is what they call it. And anyway, he was sitting there on his porch, and he could see the river there, and he had his bus parked right in front of him on the driveway. And just for, I guess, comfort and signs of hope, and we were over there visiting with him, and my buddy said to him, he said, tried to give him some words of support, and said, I think you're going to see this through. I think you're going to come through the other end of this thing. It looks like you're going to be all right. And he said, "Fergie, I got cancer." I'm dying. I said, I'd trade my body for yours right now. He said, Jesus, you don't want my body. You want some young, good-looking guy that can sing. And I think he cracked a smile on that, as you know, down and morbid as it all was. It was just, you know, it was good to see him laugh a little bit. I was over at his house one day, and I had another guy from out of town that had wanted to meet him, so I took him over there, and he had this big trap door in the floor of his, kind of in his living room. And I said, John, what's down there? He goes, you want to go look down there? And I said, yeah, sure. And so we pried this big trap door open, and there was stairs that went down. And his house was built right on Cumberland River, and so it's all rock up there. But down underneath his house is what that house sat on, all that bedrock. But he had created this little space down there and had it all kind of glassed in or whatever. And there was a room down there where he could write and draw and do whatever he was inspired to do. And he hadn't been down there in a while. It was a little cobwebby down there, but he gave us a little tour of his little secret writing space down there underneath the house. Which is kind of funny because later on, when after he passed away, the funeral home, you know, they took some clothes to the funeral home that he was going to be dressed in this casket and this and that. So Marie went over to take a look, make sure everything was in order, and she said, "What's this string around his neck?" And they said, "Well, we don't know. Everything was bundled up together in the clothes, and we just put it on him. It's a cape." She said, "What?" They said, "It's a cape," and apparently their grandson's cape got mixed up in the clothes that he was supposed to wear, you know, and so we didn't know what to do, so we just put it on him, they said. And they said, "Do you want us to remove it?" She says, "No, it's perfect." So it's kind of hard to know where that cape, you know, that is like a real Hartford caper right there. But you know what Guy Clark says, and Berlin Thompson, always trust your cape. Anyway, speaking of John's gravestone, it was designed by Willie Matthews, and Willie Matthews is a renowned artist from Colorado. And if you've ever been to the Telluride Bluegrass Festival or seen any of their posters for their yearly festival, Willie has done all their posters, I think, probably for 40 years. And so he was the designer of John's stone, and he told me that he conferred with Marie mostly over the telephone back then. Was 2001, so beginnings of being able to email things and design pieces and that kind of thing. Anyway, it's kind of a neat stone, which it's all granite, and at the very top kind of has that sort of tooled leather look across the top, and then in the center is the alabaster blend of the banjo head and the fiddle, which are two of John's passions. And it looks like it's created a little tiny shelf where people come and leave picks and little doodads on there. But he had never seen it in person, so he came here for Tim O'Brien's 60th birthday party, which was sort of in the spirit of John Hartford. It was like a 3 or 4 day party that he had with shows every night at the Station Inn and jams at his house, and people that he had played music with all over those 6 decades all came and converged on Nashville for a couple of days, really in the spirit of John Hartford and his Christmas parties. And but anyway, I brought Willie over and I took his picture at the stone, and he got to see it first, you know, up close, firsthand. He had such a great relationship with all of the you know, the real founders of, you know, what we consider the golden age of country music, which would be, you know, people like Grandpa Jones, and of course Benny Martin was one of his very best friends, and he officiated Benny Martin's funeral, which was another very interesting. He gave these wonderful eulogies, and his eulogy for Roy Husky Jr. was just an amazing few minutes of him speaking about Roy and his unique abilities, and the same for Benny Martin. And he talked about how Benny Martin could be sitting there talking to you, looking over your fiddle bow, have it completely apart and identified and put back together before you ever knew what was happening. And I remember he said, "There'll always be a seat at our table at Thanksgiving for Benny, and they were just very close friends. And he, adopted a lot of Benny's fiddle style, and everybody tried to imitate Benny Martin. Uh, he was a high standard bearer for just perfect bluegrass fiddle, and so everybody strived to meet that, and just to get to know Benny and be around him and watch him play and that sort of thing was, you know, uh, a wonderful experience. And I think John just really he took all he could from a lot of those, original guys, and was able to be around them and talk to them and know them as people, kind of off the stage and behind the stage. Yeah, I remember his wife saying, John wanted nothing more than to be an old man. He wanted to espouse his knowledge and his wisdom onto a whole nother generation, because he had been there and seen it all. And what a career! I mean, just from there's a song about it, his school teacher getting the wheelhouse of a steamboat put in a sunken steamboat near the school. They took the wheelhouse and put it in the playground, and that began his fascination with riverboats and river lore. Was just playing on that wheelhouse, and then from there, becoming a musician, and from there winding up in Los Angeles as a writer and a musician, and the whole Glenn Campbell thing. And then he had a song that just was probably, you know, recorded by more major recording artists, maybe than any other song. Who knows? Maybe there's others, but I know in his case, "Gentle on My Mind" was recorded by well over 200 major recording artists, and we're talking everybody from Frank Sinatra to who knows, the Osmond family probably. I mean, whoever the biggest thing was on TV, everybody recorded that song, or TV and radio, and I think it sustained him in a way that gave him the life that he really wanted, which was, just play music. And he was basically a solo act for much of his career, real troubadour, and stand up in front of people and play solo is just it's the hardest thing in the world. But he was a master at it, and but he also understood all of the vaudeville techniques of entertaining people, which he learned from all of the masters, and especially here in Nashville, all the great opera stars and people that he was around, and real showmen. They knew how to put on a show. I was at a great festival they used to have in Cincinnati called Hall Stacks, and that's where they brought in all the riverboats from all over the country, because even the ones from New Orleans could get up there, through locks and up the Ohio River from the Mississippi and make your way up there. And he knew the sound of every whistle. He knew what every boat whistle sounded like. He could tell you who it was that was blowing their horn, blowing their whistle, by the tone of it. And I never knew they had a uniquely pitched whistle, but they all do. And he knew the sounds of all of them. And he could tell you which boat that was. We sure miss him. He was such a, all these people that we talk about here, they're all such unique, individual, and original people in our music community, that just the shoes are so large, they'll never be filled by anybody, And that's why it's nice to come here and remember them and revisit some of those memories. And every time I come here, I remember something will come up that I hadn't thought of in a long time, an experience or a moment that we had. And so I visit over here often. I like to come over. Of course, this gazebo here at John's gravesite, I think, is designed just for that very thing, is that they want people to come here and play music. And I've done it many times. I bring a lot of people over here, and we'll play a little bit and tell John Hartford stories.